A blind man gives a secret signal to his German Shepherd. And what the dog does shocks the judge. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always awesome to see how far our stories are reaching. In apartment 204, Michael Carter, a man of Spanish descent but raised in the northern US, sat in his dark leather armchair, his fingers brushing the warm fur of Shadow, his German Shepherd guide dog. The apartment was dim, not out of necessity, but by choice. For Michael, darkness wasn't absence. It was companionship. Shadow tensed. His ears perked up, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Michael, though blind, felt it. "Again?" he whispered. The sounds came from the apartment next door. At first, they were just noises. A door slamming at odd hours, hurried footsteps, something breaking. But for the past 3 nights, Michael had heard something more subtle, more heart-wrenching. A child's stifled sob, as if the pain had to hide even from itself. Shadow moved to the door. His steps were firm, his breathing uneasy. Michael stood, tracing the floor with his cane like a recited prayer. He approached, placed a hand on the dog's back and waited. Then, a sharp, brief, but deeply human sound. A whimper. Michael felt something break inside him. He closed his eyes, not out of need but reflex. Sometimes even the blind needed to turn away from unbearable reality. The next day, he went to the district police station. The officer who greeted him treated him with a mix of pity and condescension. "Mr. Carter, you say you heard screams?" "Yes, a child, and it's not just that. My dog reacts every time that kid passes by in the hallway. Something's wrong in there." "Do you have proof? Videos? Photos?" "I'm blind." "We understand. But without solid evidence, we can't act." The words hung in the air like an absurd verdict. Without visual proof. What cruel irony for a man who'd lost his sight on a battlefield, saving children he'd never see again. Michael returned home frustrated. But Shadow, as if he understood more than any human could, sat in front of him and rested his head on his lap. It was a silent promise. "You're not alone." 2 nights later, a violent storm tore through the sky. Lightning slashed across the heavens like glowing blades. Michael wasn't sleeping. He sat by the window, listening to the world seemingly crumble outside. A knock at the door. Shadow barked, not aggressively but urgently. Michael approached cautiously, his heart pounding like an ancient drum. As he opened the door, the wind carried the smell of mud, fear, and blood. "Hello," he said, reaching out. A small figure shivered in the doorway. A soaked child, lips purple, a cut above his eyebrow. Shadow approached and gently licked the boy's hand, as if recognizing him from another life. The boy didn't run. He fell to his knees and wrapped his arms around the dog's neck. "My name's Ethan," he whispered, his voice so broken it was barely audible. Michael knelt, guided by the boy's ragged breathing, by his stifled sobs. He hugged him gently. "You're safe now." He brought him inside, dried him off, cleaned his wounds with practiced hands. Ethan trembled, not just from the cold, but from something deeper. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" Michael asked. Ethan hesitated. Then he pulled something from his pocket, a small broken bracelet stained with dried blood. "He says if I talk, he'll take me to the other kids." Michael felt the world stop. Shadow growled, standing between Ethan and the door, a loyal and protective Shadow. And so, without yet knowing it, fate had woven together 3 wounded souls. The silence was about to speak, and when it did, nothing would ever be the same. Dawn didn't bring calm. In Michael Carter's apartment, light barely slipped through the heavy curtains. The air felt thick, as if it held its breath. Ethan slept on the couch, wrapped in a blanket too big for him, like he wanted to hide from the world inside it. Shadow stayed close, watching every move with soulful eyes. Michael made chamomile tea. Moving with practiced precision, he set the cup on the table and approached the couch slowly. "Ethan," he said softly, "it's morning." The boy opened his eyes with effort. They had the dull look of someone who'd seen things no one should. He didn't cry. He had no tears left. "Where am I?" "A safe place." Michael sat across from him, hands on his knees. "I'm Michael. This is Shadow. Last night, you came to my door. You were hurt." Ethan looked down. Shadow, sensing the moment, rested his head on the boy's legs. "I shouldn't have come. If he finds out, he'll punish me worse." Michael didn't need sight to know he was the Shadow haunting Ethan. "You mean your stepfather, Robert?" The boy nodded slightly, He says no one will believe me. If I try to run, he'll make me disappear, like the others. Michael swallowed hard. A sharp pain stabbed his chest. In his military days, he'd heard plenty of horror stories, but this was different. It was domestic, invisible, silent. What others, Ethan? The boy hesitated. Then he got up barefoot and went to his still wet backpack. He pulled out a crumpled drawing. It was childlike but chilling. Small figures locked behind bars, a man's silhouette in the background with a twisted smile and dark eyes. A dog stood protecting them, facing the monster. Michael ran his fingers over the paper. He couldn't see it, but he could feel it. Where did you make this? In my hiding spot where I keep my stuff. He never found it. Can you take me there? Ethan looked at him with a spark of hope. Shadow gave a soft bark, like he approved the mission. Hours later, with Ethan leading and Michael following the echo of his voice, they went down to the building's basement. It was damp, smelling of old concrete and mold. At the back, behind rusty boxes, Ethan knelt and opened a hole covered by cardboard. From there, he pulled out a shoebox, his treasure. Inside were more drawings, a broken bracelet with dried blood, and a small voice recorder. I used it to record him when he thought I was asleep. Michael said nothing. He took the recorder gently. Don't play it now, Ethan begged. He might hear. They went back upstairs in silence. Shadow kept glancing at the stairs like he expected an invisible threat. When they reached the apartment, the door was ajar. Michael froze. Shadow growled. Ethan stepped back. Then a familiar, sharp, venomous voice came from inside. Where the hell is my kid? It was Robert. His presence filled the space like toxic smoke. Tall, with a stern face and a chiseled jaw, his eyes cold as steel. I knew it, he spat. A damn blind guy kidnapping kids. What a joke. Shadow stepped between Robert and Ethan at once. The dog stood rigid, teeth bared but still controlled. Michael raised a hand. Don't take another step, Robert. And what are you gonna do, glare at me? Silence fell like a guillotine. Ethan hid behind Michael. Robert stepped forward. Shadow growled. Then dramatically, two cops appeared in the hallway, alerted by a neighbor who'd heard shouting. Back off, one officer ordered. Robert raised his hands theatrically. Finally, someone with sense. This man stole my kid, and that dog nearly attacked me. Michael didn't flinch. The boy came on his own, and I have proof. Proof? What kind of proof could a guy who can't see Jack have? Ethan screamed. He's not my dad. He's not my dad. Everyone went quiet. Robert looked down for a second. Shadow sniffed him, then barked with restrained fury. One officer approached Michael. We need you to come with us. You and the kid. The dog, too. Robert smirked, triumphant. But when they tried to leash Shadow, the dog resisted, not with violence, but anguish. The sound he made as they separated him from Michael was gut-wrenching, like an ancient wail, like a heart breaking. As they were taken away, the neighbor from 206 whispered, tears in her eyes. That dog sees more than all of us combined. The police station smelled of damp paper, stale coffee, and suspicion. The walls were a gray that seemed to have given up years ago. Michael sat in an interrogation room, back straight, hands on his thighs. He showed no fear, but inside something was cracking. Shadow's absence was an open wound. Ethan was in another room with a social worker who looked at him like he was a tough puzzle. The boy didn't talk. He answered in grunts, eyes fixed on the door, waiting for either rescue or horror to walk through. In another part of the building, Shadow was in a makeshift kennel at animal control. He'd tried to resist but didn't attack. His loyalty wasn't violence, it was devotion. Now, caged, he panted anxiously, scratching the concrete like each scrape was a call to his owner. At that moment, a woman with a sharp presence entered the station. Blonde hair tied back, eyes cold as marble, carrying a black leather briefcase. It was Sarah Mitchell, the district prosecutor, born in Virginia, trained at Yale, and known for her lack of emotion in court. She'd never let a tragic story sway her from legal procedure. The suspect? She asked, voice flat. Michael Carter, ex-military, blind. The dog's in control, a young assistant told her. Blind? She repeated without feeling. And how's he supposed to have kidnapped a kid? According to the stepfather, the boy was coerced into staying at his place through emotional manipulation, and the dog's a threat. Sarah raised an eyebrow, not out of empathy but logic. Something didn't add up. She entered the room where Michael waited. Mr. Carter, I'm the prosecutor on your case. Michael turned his face toward her, as if he could see beyond her voice. What do you see, prosecutor? He asked calmly. A kidnapper or a man a kid came to for help? I see a decorated ex-soldier, blind with a charge of unlawful retention of a minor. What concerns me is whether your intent was really to help, or if there's more to this. I don't need eyes to know when a kid's scared to go home. I heard it, I felt it. Shadow did too. And you, prosecutor, have you ever felt fear with your eyes closed? Sarah didn't answer right away. Something in Michael's voice shook her emotional wall, though she didn't let it show. Do you have evidence? Michael pulled the recorder from his pocket. He placed it on the table. This is what I have. Recordings the kid made. Drawings. A bloody broken bracelet. Things you don't make up. Sarah took the recorder. She pressed play. A deep male voice came through, whispering, clearly recognizable. If you talk, Ethan, if you even think about saying anything, I'll take you to the others. They thought someone would protect them too. Sarah hit pause. Her face shifted for the first time, not from pity but recognition. She knew that tone. Predatory coldness. She'd questioned men like that before. I need to verify this recording, and I need to talk to the kid. She went to the next room. Ethan was still silent, but when he saw Sarah, his pupils shrank. Where's Michael? And Shadow? They're fine, she lied with surgical precision. I just need you to tell me something, Ethan. Is there anything else we should know? Ethan hesitated. Then he opened his backpack. He pulled out a recent drawing. In it, the monster, Robert, had a black bag slung over his shoulder. Inside were objects that didn't seem to belong to him. The bracelet, and more. He keeps things. Things from the kids who are gone. Sarah stormed out of the room. She didn't speak to anyone. She went straight to the police chief's office. I want a search warrant for Robert Hayes' apartment, and I demand the dog's immediate release. Michael Carter stays in administrative custody, but not as a suspect, as a key witness. Are you sure? The officer asked. I am. That dog didn't bark for no reason. And that man, he's not just an abusive stepfather, he's something worse. Hours later, Michael and Shadow reunited outside the animal control's metal door. The dog's cry wasn't just a sound, it was a roar from the soul. Michael knelt and hugged him like a lost child. Oh, you're back, he whispered. Shadow whimpered, head pressed against his human's neck. Ethan watched from a distance. For the first time, he smiled. It was midnight when prosecutor Sarah Mitchell, with 2 forensic agents and a veteran officer, stepped into apartment 203, Robert Hayes' shadowy domain. The air inside was heavy, stale. The place looked spotless at first glance. Furniture neatly aligned, clean carpets, photos carefully placed on the walls. But something about the order felt fake, too perfect, too deliberate, like it was hiding what bleach couldn't erase. Start with the kid's room, Sarah ordered, pulling out her phone to record every corner, every trace. The agents began lifting rugs, opening drawers, checking behind pictures. One of them, a thin-faced man named James Sullivan, noticed something odd on the closet wall. A ventilation grate screwed on unevenly. "Prosecutor, there's something here," he called. Sarah approached. The air coming through smelled of old dampness. Sullivan removed the screws and pulled off the grate. At the back, almost swallowed by the wall, was a grayscale shoebox. Sarah crouched, opening it with gloved hands. Inside, a chilling collection. Bracelets, hair clips, small kids' backpacks. Each item had a name. Some faded with time, others stained with dried blood. At the bottom, a black bag with a metal zipper, the same one from Ethan's drawing. When she opened it, out came vials of controlled medications, strong sedatives, photos of unfamiliar kids, and a notebook with dates, names, and coded symbols. Sarah swallowed hard. We've got what we need. Meanwhile, Michael waited with Ethan in a juvenile court observation room. Shadow, now free, lay at their feet, alert but calm. The bond between the three was clear. Ethan leaned against Michael, like he'd finally found a solid foundation. "What happens now?" the boy asked, voice faint. "The truth can't stay hidden forever," Michael said, "and you carry it. In every word, every drawing, every silence." Suddenly, the door opened. Sarah appeared, for the first time, without her briefcase. Her eyes weren't cold marble anymore. They looked like glass about to crack. "Robert Hayes has been arrested. The evidence points to a larger network. The FBI's been notified. But Ethan, your testimony will be crucial. The boy looked down. His hand found Michael's. Shadow sat up, resting his muzzle on the boy's arm. I don't want to go alone, Ethan said. You won't, Michael said firmly. If you speak, I'll be there. Shadow too. Days later, in a courtroom, Ethan sat before the judge. The room was large, with dark wood benches and harsh white lights. The judge was an older man, face wrinkled, expression tired. To his left, Sarah. Across from Ethan, Robert Hayes, handcuffed, in prison clothes, but still with that predator's glare. The judge gave the signal. Ethan opened the shoebox in front of everyone. He placed the broken bracelet, the drawings, and the recorder on the table. Then he looked straight at Robert. You told me no one would believe me, that I was invisible, but someone without eyes was the only one who really saw me. Robert clenched his teeth. Shadow, beside Ethan, let out a deep growl. Michael, from the witness bench, raised his hand subtly. It was enough. Shadow moved. With steady steps, he walked toward Robert. The judge tried to stop him, but Sarah signaled, let him go. Shadow stopped in front of Robert, sniffed the bag the defendant had tried to hide, and with one paw, knocked it to the floor. The contents spilled across the marble. More medications, a videotape, and 2 necklaces with kids' name tags. The silence was deafening. The judge looked up, stunned. Order in the court. Sarah stood. Your Honor, what we've just seen is a conditioned behavioral response. The dog only reacts to smells and triggers tied to his training and emotional memory. That bag holds items from prior victims. Robert tried to speak. This is a setup. Those things aren't mine. But no one was listening anymore. Michael smiled for the first time in days. Ethan let out a breath, and Shadow, calm, returned to his boy's side. Weeks passed since the trial, but the scars lingered. The Robert Hayes case became national news. Federal authorities, spurred by the evidence found in the apartment, dismantled a secret network operating across nearby states. There were kids missing for years. For many parents, the unthinkable was confirmed, leaving only grief and ashes. Amid that devastation, Michael, Ethan, and Shadow returned to their apartment. The place was the same, quiet walls, heavy curtains, but something new was there. Presence, life, trust. Ethan, now attending a school for trauma victims, showed clear signs of change. His gaze was steadier, his shoulders less hunched. He still carried scars, but he knew he didn't have to hide them. One morning, Michael sat on the balcony with a cup of tea in his hands. Shadow lay at his feet, watching the world with that almost human look of someone who'd seen too much. Ethan appeared, holding a cardboard folder. It's for you, he said shyly. Michael felt the folder. Inside were dozens of pages, drawings, writings, and in the center a title in big letters written with a blue marker, Heartsight. I want it to be the project's name, Ethan explained, so other kids like me don't have to be afraid to speak, and if they're scared, they'll at least have someone who listens. Michael ran his fingers over the letters and smiled. It's a good name. Shadow let out a small bark, like he agreed. That's how the pilot program began. Heartsight, a non-profit dedicated to training emotional support dogs for kids facing court or traumatic situations in the legal system. It started with a few volunteers, therapists, trainers, teachers, but it soon gained institutional support, including from Sarah, who became a fierce advocate after the case. On a special afternoon, the community school auditorium was packed. Parents, educators, reporters, and kids. On stage, a row of dogs in colorful vests with attentive eyes. Among them, Shadow, with his calm, noble stance beside Ethan, who held a microphone with both hands. Michael sat in the front, tense, not from fear, but pride. It was like watching a flower bloom from stone. Ethan took a deep breath. When I was younger, I thought heroes were invisible, like in comics. But I learned some heroes don't fly. They walk quietly. They don't wear capes. They wear collars. They don't see with eyes. They see with their soul. The crowd went silent. The kind of silence that screams louder than words. The silence Michael knew so well. Michael saved me. Shadow protected me. But most importantly, they listened. That's why this place exists, so no kid feels alone in the dark. Tears fell quietly on many faces. Even Sarah, always composed, brushed her eyes discreetly. At the end, Ethan ran to Michael and hugged him tightly. "Do you think I could train dogs like Shadow someday?" "Of course," Michael said, voice thick. "And when you do, they'll see with their hearts too." Summer hit Riverside with unexpected heat. The streets smelled of melting asphalt and blooming jasmine, the sky a broken promise, blue but uncertain. For Michael, the season brought memories of war zones, muffled screams, and losses time couldn't erase. But now his life had a quiet routine, still marked by pain, but lit by purpose. Ethan slept late on Sundays. Shadow rested beside him like a living statue. Michael, coffee mug in hand, a podcast playing low, listened more with his body than his ears. The city seemed asleep, but his instincts, shaped by years of combat and silence, said otherwise. That morning, the doorbell rang. Shadow lifted his head with a near-silent growl. Michael frowned. They weren't expecting anyone. "Who's there?" he asked, nearing the door. "My name's David Brooks, investigative journalist. I work for the Riverside Independent." Michael didn't answer right away. He reached out, sensing the man's presence through the door. The vibe was tense. Something was off. "What do you want?" "I won't lie. I'm writing a series on the Hayes case, and there are things that didn't come to light." Michael opened the door slowly. Shadow stood between him and the visitor. The man was tall, blonde hair slicked back, suit wrinkled, eyes exhausted. He carried a notepad and recorder. "Come in. But if you're here to hurt that kid, I'll know before you do." David nodded, barely breathing. Minutes later, sitting across from each other, the journalist dropped the first bomb. Robert Hayes wasn't acting alone. He was part of a bigger circle, and some of the evidence you turned over, it's gone missing from the chain of custody. Michael's brow furrowed. Shadow growled. "What evidence?" "One of the tapes. The most damning one. It named powerful people. It vanished from the police archive the night before the trial." Michael gripped his knees tightly. "Are you saying other kids are in danger?" "I'm saying they are, and they're being silenced. Some of Hayes' partners are free, untouched, untouchable, because they have friends in the system." The silence that followed was thick as concrete. "I need your help," David went on. "You have Ethan's trust. He knows things, and he hasn't told everything." Michael stood slowly. Shadow did too. "You want to use that kid as bait." "I want justice," the journalist said, firmer. "Same as you. But we need to expose it. If we don't, this will keep happening. In other states, to other kids, and no one will know until it's too late." Michael took a deep breath. He squeezed his eyes shut, like he could see through the darkness. "Let me talk to him, but if I sense one crack, one hint of exploitation in your voice, your approach, or your pen, I swear you won't need eyes to see the damage I'll do." David swallowed hard. Hours later, Michael sat with Ethan in the Heartsight Project garden. They were alone. The breeze carried the sweet scent of lavender. "Ethan, remember what you told me about the other voices? The names Hayes mentioned when he thought you were asleep?" Ethan stopped drawing. The pencil tip shook in his hand. "I didn't say them before because he threatened me. He said if I named them, they'd come for you, for Shadow, and I'd be alone." Michael put a hand on his shoulder. "No one's leaving you alone, Ethan. But there are other kids still out there, and someone wants to help us tell the truth." Ethan closed his eyes. For a moment, he was that fragile boy in the hallway again. But then, like a flame reigniting inside, he nodded. "I have one more recording. It's not in the box. I hid it where no one would look." "Where?" Ethan smiled like he held a powerful secret. "At the old lakeside cabin, the one my mum owned before she disappeared." Michael felt a chill. Shadow stood slowly. The lakeside cabin. A new setting. A new echo of secrets. The story was far from over. The road to the old lakeside cabin was narrow and unpaved. Trees formed a dark, damp, natural tunnel, like the forest was guarding a secret. Michael drove slowly, window down, feeling the breeze on his face. Shadow sat in the back with Ethan, who clutched a small backpack to his chest like it held his very soul. No one spoke. The cabin belonged to Ethan's mom, Emily Harper. A blonde woman with a gentle voice and restless eyes. She vanished 5 years ago under circumstances never explained. Her name had slipped from records with unsettling ease. Robert claimed she'd abandoned her son, but Ethan always knew silently that was a lie. When they arrived, the place seemed untouched by time. The wooden exterior was darkened but sturdy. The windows, covered with yellowed white curtains, fluttered in the wind. Something lingered there, an absent presence. Emily's absence weighed on the cabin like fog. Michael got out first. Shadow, ever alert, jumped from the car and sniffed the air, muzzle low, body tense. Ethan hesitated before stepping out, his blue eyes fixed on the front door. "It's in there. I hid it in the piano. My mom taught me to use it as a secret safe. She said music could guard secrets better than any lock." Inside, the smell was a mix of old wood and forgotten books. The living room had a stone fireplace, shelves with classic novels, and in the center an upright piano with yellowed keys, the same one Emily used to play on rainy nights. Ethan walked to it. He pressed two specific keys. A click echoed. He carefully removed a panel from inside the piano and pulled out a small digital recorder wrapped in a satin cloth. Michael stepped closer, feeling each step through the creaking floor. "You sure about what's on it?" Ethan nodded. "It was the last time I heard him talk on the phone with someone. He said names and one was a senator." Michael sat. He took the recorder in his hands. His finger traced the buttons until he found play. Robert's voice came through, clear, arrogant. "Don't worry, Thomas, the kids are under control. If the blind guy starts snooping, I'll handle it. We've got the judge, and if we need another dose, she's got the prescription." The silence that followed was like a blade. Michael closed his hand around the device. Shadow let out a guttural whimper. Ethan stepped back. "Did you hear that?" the boy asked. "He said he had a judge and the prescription. They're drugging the victims with inside help. And if it's a judge, the network's bigger than we thought." A sharp noise cut the air. Outside, footsteps, branches snapping. Michael turned to Ethan, staying calm. "To the closet. Now, lock it. Shadow goes with you." Ethan didn't argue. He ran. Shadow followed, nudging the door shut with his muzzle. Michael was alone. A loud bang hit the front door, then another. Finally, an unfamiliar male voice rang out. "Michael Carter, we know you're in there. Hand over the recording. This doesn't have to end badly." Michael moved to the wall and grabbed an old iron bar Emily kept by the fireplace. He set it beside his cane. "I don't need it to end badly either," he whispered to himself. The door burst open with a violent crack. Two men entered. One tall and blonde, the other broad and dark-haired, both in civilian clothes but with a military bearing. "Where's the kid?" Michael tilted his head. "What kid?" The blonde stepped closer, pulling a silenced pistol. "Don't be stupid. This isn't personal. Give us the device." Michael smiled. It was a hard smile, readable without eyes. Know what a trained dog does when it hears a specific frequency whistle? "What?" A sharp, nearly inaudible sound pierced the air. From the closet, Shadow shot out like lightning. He tackled the blonde, knocking him down hard. Michael swung, hitting the other man's knee with the iron bar, dropping him with a muffled scream. Ethan bolted out, recorder in hand, and jumped through a broken side window while Shadow kept both intruders pinned. Michael, panting, reached toward the sound of Ethan's footsteps. "Run to the car! Don't stop! Find David!" The boy ran like the ground was on fire. And that night, as police sirens finally tore through the forest silence, Michael stood at the cabin's threshold. "Tell me in the comments, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Your opinion means a lot to me." Breathing hard, fists clenched, face streaked with sweat and dust. He knew they'd crossed a line. Now, they weren't just telling the truth, they were fighting for it. Dawn broke with a biting chill as Ethan, still shaking, reached the Riverside Independence entrance. The lobby lights were off, but a lone figure waited by the glass door. It was David Brooks, the journalist. Wrinkled clothes, dark circles etched into his pale face, and a look torn between alarm and resolve. "Ethan, you okay?" The boy, gasping, held out the recorder with dirty, scratched hands. "They tried to kill us. Michael's at the cabin. They stayed there." David didn't ask questions. He hugged Ethan with one arm and dialed a number with the other. "I've got the file. Activate emergency protocol. Red level. Repeat, red level." Within 20 minutes, the building lit up like a space station. Technicians flooded the newsroom. Legal analysts began reviewing the recording, and a group of lawyers tied to an investigative consortium gathered silently. The name Thomas Bradley, a longtime senator, was mentioned directly in the recording. There was no denying it. The scandal would explode. Meanwhile, the state police, now under public and media pressure, raced to the lakeside cabin. Michael, with a cut above his eyebrow and a sore rib, was found sitting on the porch, Shadow beside him. watching the tied-up bodies of the two attackers. "Don't move," an officer said, seeing him. "We're here to help." Michael gave a wry smile. "Took you long enough. Better late than never." Hours later, in a live televised press conference, the scandal broke like a grenade of buried truths. David read parts of the recording with a steady voice. Prosecutor Sarah Mitchell, absent until then, stepped onto the stage and took the mic, her face grim. "We've confirmed that members of the judiciary, state politics, and local police were part of a trafficking and silencing scheme targeting minors. The network will be dismantled. The victims will be heard. From today, no title will shield a criminal." Michael's name was cited as the key whistleblower. Ethan's was protected by court order. But the whole country knew without knowing who the boy was who dared to speak. At home, Ethan watched the broadcast, eyes wide. Wrapped in a blanket, Shadow lay beside him, head on his legs. Michael sat behind, listening, body tense, muscles still on edge. "Was that justice?" Ethan asked, not turning. Michael thought for a moment. "It's the first step. Justice is when there's no more fear. And that, we're not there yet." In the days that followed, their world changed. The Heartsight Project's headquarters grew with unexpected donations. Doctors, judges, psychologists, and trainers sought Michael for guidance. But peace was fragile. On a grey morning, a letter arrived at the building, no sender. Inside, just an old photo. Emily Harper, Ethan's mom, holding hands with a blonde man. On the back, handwritten, "She's still alive, but not for long." Michael gripped the photo. Shadow sniffed the envelope. His body stiffened. Ethan, seeing the image, dropped the cup he was holding. "That's the man who came at night and the one who brought envelopes to Robert." Michael stood. This isn't over. And as Shadow's eyes locked on the door, it was like fate itself had heard. 3 years had passed since Ethan's first silent tear fell in the damp hallway of the building. 3 years since Shadow growled at what Michael's eyes could never see. 3 years since the world finally chose to hear what so many kids screamed with silent hearts. The Robert Hayes case sparked legislative reforms across several states. The Ethan Shadow Law, passed unanimously in the Riverside State Congress, mandated emotional support dogs during minor victims' testimonies. Heartsight became an international reference, with training centers in the US, Canada, and a major European city. Michael, now with grayer hair and a slightly cautious gait, refused all interviews. He stayed silent, working as a counselor and mentor to new trainers. His world remained dark, but within it was a steady light. The kind you carry when you know you did right, even blind. Ethan grew. Now 10, he was taller, steadier. He'd learned to smile without fear and sleep without curling up. He kept drawing. In an exhibit by survivors, he showed a collection called Those Without Names, with portraits of lost kids' faces, some real, some rebuilt from memory and pain. The proceeds went to orphanages and rescue centers. And Emily? She was found in a rural clinic in a remote European country, held under a false mental instability diagnosis. One of the network's last international branches fell under joint FBI and Interpol investigation. Emily returned, face paler, eyes marked but her voice still gentle. Her reunion with Ethan was a moment even words didn't dare interrupt. Shadow wasn't the same agile dog anymore. The years and trauma weighed on him too, but his presence was revered. At the official opening of the International Canine Support Center in a major European city, he was honored with a symbolic medal for seeing where others chose not to look. In the front row, Ethan held Shadow's leash tightly. "Do you realize, Shadow?" he whispered, stroking his neck. "I don't need to hide anymore, and you taught me to look without fear." Michael, beside him, smiled, hearing Shadow's calm breathing and Ethan's steady voice. There were no more screams from the other side of the wall. Now on the other side, there was only peace. Thank you so much for sticking with this story until the end. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a ton and motivates us to keep bringing new stories every week. And since you're here, take a moment to check out another one of our stories that's popping up on your screen. Big hug and see you next time. Stay well.